Carcinoma gallbladder. We'll start with carcinoma of the gallbladder, and if we see biliary tract cancers, carcinoma gallbladder is the commonest, which accounts for about 60 to 70% of cases, and cholangiocarcinomas, which may be perihilar, intrahepatic, or distal in the distal CBD, they are very rare, and we'll be discussing mainly about carcinoma gallbladder. Gallbladder cancer occurs in elderly more than 70 years age group. It's more common in female, 3:1, and it's more common in Chileans, American Indians, and northern India. 60% of the cancers in gallbladder occur in the fundus, and 90% of times it's adenocarcinoma. Tumor recurrence is very common after a surgery, and prognosis is very poor for carcinoma gallbladder. Usually the median survival is less than 6 months, and 5-year survival is about 5%. Histologically, adenocarcinoma is most common. 80 to 95% of times it's adenocarcinoma. The other histological types are anaplastic, squamous cell carcinoma, adenosquamous, and besides that, certain rare types are carcinoid, small cell carcinoma, malignant melanoma, lymphoma, and sarcomas. The tumors may be either papillary or tubular or nodular. Papillary is less invasive, it grows on the luminal side, and it's associated with lesser lymph node or liver invasion, and so carries a little bit better prognosis when compared to the flatter and nodular types. Risk factors and pathogenesis of gallbladder cancer. Chronic inflammations in the gallbladder, either because of cholelithiasis or inflammatory bowel disease or typhoid, have been implicated for the causation of gallbladder cancer. The process of mucosal inflammation leading to hyperplasia, dysplasia, finally metaplasia, and carcinoma uh, takes a very long duration, maybe around 10 to 20 years. And cholelithiasis has been very commonly implicated for chronic inflammation of the gallbladder, and it's been labeled as a risk factor for developing cancer. When we see cholelithiasis, only 0.3 to 3% patients of cholelithiasis will develop cancer. Conversely, when we see carcinoma of the gallbladder, almost 80% of the patients of carcinoma of the gallbladder do have cholelithiasis. The size of the stone, that is, if it is 2 centimeter or more, is more often associated with cancer. A stone size of 2 to 2.9 centimeter size has about 2.5 times greater risk of developing cancer. And when the size of the stone is 3 centimeter or more, the risk increases by 10 times. Porcelain gallbladder has also been associated with the cancers, and in different series, the risk of cancer in porcelain gallbladder is 10% to 62%. And stippled calcification of the mucosa is more often associated with cancer rather than generalized calcification of the gallbladder wall. Gallbladder polyps are again implicated for developing into cancer. These polyps, when they are more than 10 millimeter size, they should be subjected to cholecystectomy for increasing association with cancer after this size. However, if the patient is in a high risk group, like if the patient is symptomatic, has got alarm symptoms like loss of weight and loss of appetite, even polyps with 6 millimeter to 9 millimeter size should be subjected for cholecystectomy. Anomalous pancreaticobiliary duct junction has been associated with the development of choledochal cyst, cholangiocarcinoma, as well as gallbladder carcinoma. Uh, Cancer in the colon has a higher incidence of developing colon cancer, especially hereditary familial polyposis or link syndromes. There may be an association of gallbladder cancer in these patients. Carcinogens have been implicated like nitrosamines, methyl uh, colanthrin. There may be a genetic predisposition. Genetic abnormalities in gallbladder cancer. Gallbladder cancer is associated with a number of genetic abnormalities. Uh, KRAS and P53, these are two genes which are very commonly associated with gallbladder cancer and have been studied extensively. KRAS is an oncogene which is responsible for epidermal growth factor receptor pathways. And when mutation in these gene occur, it develops to excessive growth in cells. And this has been found to be associated with gallbladder cancer in 39 to 59% of cases. Similarly, P53, which is a gene responsible for cell cycle regulation, uh, it regulates the growth of cell from G1 phase to synthesis phase, that is S phase, and this is usually P53 gene which regulates it. It's a tumor suppressor gene. Mutations in tumor suppressor gene P53 have been associated with gallbladder cancer in 90% of cases. Similarly, the certain proteins which are overexpressed like HER2 new receptors, CERB2, upregulation of cyclin D1, P16, P27 and MSH12. These are usually associated with gallbladder cancers. MMR testing and microsatellite instability, which has been studied extensively in colorectal cancers, is also these testings are also done in gallbladder cancer. Mismatch repair deficiency is most common in colorectal cancer. It may also be seen in endometrial cancer, cancers of the breast, prostate, bladder, and thyroid. Mismatch repair of a DNA usually occurs constantly right after the new DNA is being made. When a cell multiplies, the DNA which is generated has a number of impaired nucleotide bases which are constantly repaired, uh, and if this repair of mismatch of nucleotides is impaired, this causes changes in the DNA or mutations. These mutations, when they occur in short repeated sequence of DNA, they are called microsatellites, and they are typically seen in tumor cells. Microsatellite instability is a condition of genetic hypermutability that results from impaired mismatch repair gene. So, whenever there are impaired mismatch repair genes, it's associated with impaired mismatch repair, and this leads to microsatellite instability. These genes can be studied by genetic testing. Clinical presentation of gallbladder cancer. Usually when we see patients of gallbladder cancer clinically, the symptoms are similar to gallbladder stone disease, that is cholelithiasis. The patients may have right hypochondrium pain, biliary colics may be there. There may be alarm symptoms like loss of appetite and loss of weight. Sometimes in advanced cases, the patients may have palpable mass, obstructive jaundice, loss of appetite is a late sign. Modes of presentation. The patients of gallbladder cancer, most of them will present in advanced stage. Usually these patients are elderly, and they present with loss of weight, loss of appetite, and right hypochondrium pain. And whenever a lump is palpable, or if the patient is presenting with obstructive jaundice, these are advanced cancers, and this is the most common presentation clinically, and usually the patients are inoperable at that stage. The second common presentation is when a clinician, a surgeon has done a cholecystectomy and the histopathologist reports incidentally gallbladder cancer in the specimen. So this is another common presentation. Third presentation is uh, when the patient has presented clinically and on investigation, uh, the clinician finds mass in the gallbladder, and this may be a resectable disease, not advanced, and this is the least common presentation. So resectable cancers are usually seen in 10% of cases. More often we come across advanced cancers which are inoperable, and incidentally reported gallbladder cancers may be seen in patients operated for cholecystectomy. Staging Nevin's classification was previously used. If the gallbladder is confined only to the mucosa, it's stage 1 on Nevin's classification. If it has invaded the muscularis, it is stage 2. If all layers of the gallbladder are invaded and the tumor has come on the serosal side, it is stage 3. Stage 1 has 2 year survival of 45%, whereas when all layers of the gallbladder are affected and the tumor has come on the serosal side, this is associated with peritoneal dissemination and also increased lymphatic lymph node involvement, and the survival drops to 4%. With lymph node metastasis, the survival is still shorter, that's 2%, and when distant metastasis or adjacent organ invasion is seen, it is stage 5 of Nevin's classification. TNM classification is more often used these days for management of gallbladder cancer. It's based on evaluating the extent of the tumor, the presence of lymph nodes, and distant metastasis. Also, histological grading is used to evaluate the patients clinically. In tumor, T1 is when the tumor is uh, in the lamina propria or up to the muscular layer. T1 can be divided into T1A and T1B. When the tumor invades only the lamina propria, that means it's confined to the mucosa and submucosa, it is T1A. These tumors have very less lymphatic lymph node metastasis, and they can be managed simply by cholecystectomy. T1B is when the tumor invades the muscularis, uh, the muscle layer, and these tumors are associated with lymph node metastasis in about 12 to 20% of cases. And for this reason, simple cholecystectomy is not sufficient for these patients, and they need a radical surgery in form of cholecystectomy, lymphadenectomy, and lymph node resection. Segment 4B and 5 lymph node resection is done for these patients. So T1B to T3, these are operable cancers, uh, and the appropriate surgery for these patients is lymphadenectomy along with cholecystectomy and adjacent en bloc segment 4B5 liver resection. In T2, the tumor has invaded the perimuscular connective tissue and is present in the subserosa but not on the serosal side. And in T3, when the tumor has invaded into the adjacent liver or has come on the serosal side and invaded just one organ uh, besides the gallbladder. This organ may be either the CBD or the stomach or duodenum or colon or omentum. T4 is when the tumor invades two or more extrahepatic organs like colon or duodenum or stomach, and pancreas or main portal vein and hepatic artery are also invaded. So T4 disease is considered inoperable. Lymph nodes, based on lymph node metastasis, the tumor cancer may be gallbladder cancer can be N1 or N2. N1 is when lymph nodes along the cystic duct and common bile duct and hepatic duct or portal vein are only affected. N2 is when the lymph node in distant areas like retropancreatic lymph nodes, uh, the celiac group of lymph nodes, and superior mesenteric group of lymph nodes or etocaval or pericaval lymph nodes are also affected. Distant metastasis may occur to the liver. Disseminated metastasis in the liver is distant metastasis, whereas local contiguous spread uh, may be still resectable, but when multiple segments of liver are invaded, it is classified as distant metastasis, and it is inoperable cancer. Similarly, distant metastasis can also occur in lungs and bones. Histological grade G1, G2, G3 and G4. G1 is well differentiated, G2 is moderately differentiated, G3 is poorly differentiated, and G4 is undifferentiated. Poorly differentiated and undifferentiated cancers have very poor prognosis and may be most of the times inoperable at the time of presentation. This is diagrammatic representation of the spread of the cancer. T1 is when the tumor is confined to the mucosa and up to the muscularis. 1A is only in the mucosa. 1B is when muscularis is also affected. When it's come on the serosal side, up to the subserosa, it is T2, and when it's come on the serosal side or adjacent liver or one organ is invaded, it is T3, and when two or more organs are invaded, it is T4. Similarly, lymph node, when lymph nodes are present only along the hepatorenal ligament and cystic lymph node is affected, then it is N1, and if distant lymph nodes like celiac group of lymph node and superior mesenteric or aortic or paracaval lymph nodes are affected, it is N2. When the patient presents clinically, the clinician has to do preliminary workup to find out whether the tumor is resectable, because resection offers the best chances of survival of this patient. Although only 10% of cancers are resectable, but when it's resectable, the chances of survival are definitely significantly more as compared to when these patients are managed by chemotherapy or radiotherapy, which may be alternative treatments when the tumor is not resectable. So the initial imaging is ultrasound, and on imaging studies, usually the clinician wants to differentiate whether it's benign or a malignant lesion, to find out presence of benign strictures or adenomatosis or gallbladder cancer. Gallbladder cancer has a typical appearance on imaging studies. It's infiltrating, loss of planes between adjacent structures may be lost. There may be irregular gallbladder wall thickening. We'll talk about this. When a clinician suspects gallbladder cancer, he has to stage the disease, and for that reason, again, more refined imagings, maybe CT or MRI or PET-CT, may be required. Uh, Once there is a suspicion for cancer, the surgeon would like to find out whether it's resectable or not resectable. And then he will also like a roadmap for surgery. What will be the extent of dissection in surgery? So, imaging has an important role in management of gallbladder cancers. On ultrasound, there may be thickening of the gallbladder more than 3 millimeter, often asymmetric or irregular thickening. There may be mass projecting in the lumen, which is papillary type or polypoidal lesion in the gallbladder. There may be multiple masses or a fixed mass. There can be calcification of the gallbladder wall, which is porcelain gallbladder. Extracholecystic mass can also be seen. The mass may have lost its complete differentiation from the gallbladder, and adjacent area may also be invaded by the tumor. There can be loss of planes between gallbladder and the liver, or between the gallbladder and the duodenum. Lymph nodes may be enlarged. Ultrasound can also tell the clinician about presence of ascites and liver metastasis. In resectable cancers, to objectively find out T3, differentiate between T3, T4 disease, and to evaluate the lymph node status, endoscopic ultrasound may be useful. This is ultrasound showing a gallbladder mass, and on the right side there's wall thickening and irregular wall thickening. Polypoidal lesions can also be picked up when polypoidal lesions are seen. Usually if they are more than 6 mm and if they are present with alarm symptoms like loss of weight, loss of appetite, or if the polypoidal lesions are symptomatic, cholecystectomy is indicated. And polypoidal lesions more than 10 mm should always be subjected for cholecystectomy because these are more often associated with cancers. For more detailed clinical evaluation of the gallbladder cancer, better imaging in the form of CT scan or MRI with MRCP may be required. These imaging techniques can accurately detect gallbladder abnormality. Fixity to the adjacent structures can be demonstrated. There may be fixity to the colon or to the duodenum, or CBD may be invaded. The mass may be infiltrating the liver. Um, and this helps in planning the area or extent of resection to be done. Uh, so assessment of the liver reserve can also be done on CT images. Vascular involvement, lymph node involvement, liver infiltration and metastasis, presence of ascites, all these are helpful in planning surgery for these patients. On MRI, tumor is hypointense on T1 phase and hyperintense on T2 imaging. It's useful in evaluation of CBD and portal vein involvement. This is gallbladder mass with thickening of the walls, irregular thickening of the gallbladder wall. Similarly, on the right side, the mass is infiltrating the liver, adjacent liver. This image shows a T3 lesion of the gallbladder where liver is infiltrated, and also in the region of CBD, there's loss of fat plane between duodenum and gallbladder. Other imaging studies like ERCP and PTC may be required when the patient is having jaundice to evaluate the infiltration of the CBD, the status of the intrahepatic ducts. ERCP can better tell us about invasion of the CBD as well as the right hepatic duct. If a right hepatic duct is involved on imaging studies, the plan is a right hepatectomy along with CBD excision as opposed to segmental resections which are done for lesser invasions of liver. Angiography is done to assess the vascular anatomy and vascular encasements. These are usually inoperable cancers, and if blood vessels are encased or infiltrated, surgery can be avoided. CT guided FNAC can be done for preoperative diagnosis. Usually FNAC is done for inoperable cancers because in these patients histological confirmation is required for chemotherapy or managing the patient conservatively. PET-CT may be done if there is a doubt about resectability. PET-CT can show us distant metastasis or hot areas which may not be visible on the other imaging studies. So in this PET-CT we can see hot areas, multiple lymph nodes and parietal wall involvement. This can obviate the need for a surgery. Other preoperative investigations done for gallbladder cancer are liver function tests, kidney function tests. Tumor markers like CEA and CA19-9 are done only as a baseline test. These should not be done for confirmation of the diagnosis. These values of these CEA and CA19-9 can be used in monitoring the treatment, like after resection these values come down, and with the recurrence of disease these CEA levels and CA19 levels may keep on increasing. Preoperative laparoscopy is done usually in advanced cancers to find out whether when there is a doubt about operability or resectability of the tumor. To find out peritoneal metastasis, laparoscopy may be very useful. And if it is inoperable, the surgeon may come out with simply a biopsy and the patient may be offered chemotherapy. Management surgery is the only definitive treatment. It's possible to cure gallbladder cancer when tumors are treated surgically at an earlier stage. So T1 tumors have a very good prognosis. T1 and T2 or T3 tumors, when they are resectable, they carry the best prognosis. But only 10% are resectable for cure. So how do we find out patients who are not resectable? Any patient with metastatic disease or advanced nodal disease, N2 disease, are inoperable. Lymph nodes beyond the hepatodental ligament, usually surgeon doesn't think of surgery. And similarly, if even on lymph node on hepatodental ligament, when they're fixed to each other, surgery may not be possible in these cases. Presence of peritoneal metastasis, which can be seen on laparoscopy or sometimes on PET-CT, uh, is also a contraindication for uh, curative resections. More than two organ invasion is also a contraindication. So T4 disease is also a contraindication for curative surgery. Similarly, when both lobes of liver are involved or extensive liver resection is required, it may not be possible to leave sufficient amount of liver for the patient with trisegmentectomy sometimes. These patients are better managed conservatively. Similarly, invasion of the vascular structures like portal vein, hepatic artery, bilateral portal vein involvement, all these are contraindications for surgery. So plan of management for resectable cancer is either surgery first, followed by adjuvant chemotherapy, or these patients, some of these patients where the tumor is growing aggressively, uh, especially with T3 disease or N1 disease, when there are nodes along the hepatodental ligament, some of these patients may be offered neoadjuvant chemotherapy first, and then they may be offered surgery if they are giving a good response to chemotherapy. For patients with big mass invading liver or nodal disease, or if cystic nodes are positive, neoadjuvant chemotherapy should be considered first to rule out rapid progression of cancer and to avoid a futile surgery. The surgery for all resectable cancers is cholecystectomy with en bloc liver resection, which is segment 4B and 5 liver resection, along with lymphadenectomy. Bile duct excision may be done if the patient is having jaundice or if the tumor has infiltrated the common bile duct. A lymph node dissection to include the portal lymph nodes, peripancreatic lymph nodes, and retrorenal lymph nodes is performed. Accurate staging requires at least 6 lymph nodes to be detected, to be dissected, and based on the findings on these 6 lymph nodes which are dissected, the tumor can be accurately classified as N1 or N2. If a tumor is suspected on the bile duct or on the basis of previous pathology report or on operative exploration, if the tumor is present in the right hepatic duct, one should go for right hepatectomy rather than segment 4B and 5 resection. So it's important to preoperatively have a plan by better imaging studies, especially ERCP or CT and MRI. If the right hepatic duct is infiltrated, the patient will need extended resection rather than segment 4B5 resection. Otherwise, if the tumor is only confined to the fundus with some local liver infiltration, segment 4B5 liver resection is sufficient. For incidentally detected cancer on pathological review after lab chole, uh, once a patient has undergone a lab chole, considering that this was a benign problem, and on histology, if the histopathologist reports it to be a cancer, These patients need preoperative workup for a definitive management of these. So if it's cancer with on histology, it is T1A with negative margins, simple cholecystectomy is sufficient. But if it is T1B to T3 lesion, that means the tumor has invaded the muscularis or one adjacent structure like CBD or duodenum, then these patients will need preoperative workup as well as more definitive treatment for management of their cancer. So these patients should be subjected to CT, MRI with or with contrast, and CT of the chest, a cholangiography or MRCP may be done, and then these patients should be subjected to radical surgery, which is cholecystectomy with en bloc liver resection, segment 4B and 5, and lymphadenectomy. If the bile duct is invaded, bile duct resection with hepatic angiostomy is also required. And then these patients may be put under surveillance and offered adjuvant chemotherapy. If cystic lymph node dissected along with gallbladder is positive, these patients may be offered neoadjuvant chemotherapy first, followed by a radical cholecystectomy if they are operable on imaging studies. Management of unresectable tumors. When the tumor is found to be not resectable on imaging studies, the patients are subjected to a number of genetic studies like microsatellite instability testing, mismatch repair gene testing, anti-RK gene fusion testing. And if mismatch repair gene is deficient and if the patient has a high microsatellite instability, or there is a family history suggestive of BRCA1 or 2 mutations, these patients can be counseled for going for genetic counseling or germline testings. All unresectable tumors, patients should be offered either systemic chemotherapy if they can tolerate that chemotherapy, or palliative radiotherapy, and those who cannot tolerate chemotherapy or radiotherapy should be offered best supportive care. Radiotherapy may be given after tumor resection, or brachytherapy may be given through PTC catheters in order to palliate obstructive jaundice. Chemotherapy, single agent chemotherapy with gemcitabine or capacitabine or 5-FU is more often used because the patients very often have jaundice and they cannot tolerate combination chemotherapies. But if the patient is having good Karnofsky's performance status or is low on ECOG, less than ECOG 2, these patients can be offered combination chemotherapy with gemcitabine, capacitabine, 5-FU in combination with cisplatin or oxaliplatin. Survival figures are dismal. Usually for all advanced tumors, the median survival is less than 6 months. Non-resectable cancers, 1 year survival is less than 5%. But if the patient can be operated and a curative resection can be done, then T1 tumors have 100% 5-year survival when the tumor is confined only to the mucosa. T2 tumors have 38 to 77% of 5-year survival, whereas locally advanced disease like T3, T4 and N1 disease have only 25% survival with extended resections. Overall survival is less than 5%.